Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome back. For those of you who have watched our SASH conversations from the couch before, you may have seen me before, but you may not have seen my guests today. I'm delighted to welcome Josh and Adam from Santé. I'd love you both to start by just saying a brief hello and introducing yourselves.
Josh, I'm a clinical social worker and a CSAT candidate working here at Santé Center for Healing.
Thank you, Josh. And Adam?
Adam Karazuba, clinical social worker. I am the director of clinical services at Santé Center.
Fantastic. Guys, you both have wonderful names. Zuba almost sounds sort of Zulu, and Petra sounds very French. So wonderful to meet such globe-trotting names. Welcome to you both. Thank you for your time. This is a chance to have a friendly, fun chat about what you do with such passion, and what I know you do so well. You guys have sent me a bunch of questions. I'm going to be looking occasionally at my left-hand screen here. I promise I'm not looking at emails. So guys, let's jump in and talk about what you do. And the first question I'd love to ask you is this: Santé is known as a substance abuse treatment center, but obviously you treat a multiple range of things. How often do you see problematic sexual health co-occurring with other things? And how long have you been treating problematic sexual behavior?
Sure. So we were founded in 1996, and really even dating back before that, our founders had started working in the field around problematic sexual behavior and sexual health. Since 96, when we opened, it has been a significant portion of our client population and a very important part of our work. Lately, in the last few years, admissions to our residential center, about 20 to 25% are primarily diagnosed with problematic sexual behaviors. I think we find that the longer clients stay with us, some more of the problematic behaviors tend to emerge. Not necessarily acting out in the community, however, more so about as they're doing the work, as they're getting a little more connected to the trauma and their experiences that led to the substance abuse part of their addiction. We find that there's some problematic sexual behaviors in there. So all in, I think we push about 40%, but 25% or so come in primarily for sexual behavior.
I love being open with people I talk to. I'm in recovery for sex addiction, have been since the 21st of June 2004 was my very first 12-step meeting. I'll never forget it. And for over the last 20 years, it's definitely not been a nice, beautiful, straight line curve for me progressing. There's been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of roller coaster times, but it makes perfect sense. I've sat in SAA meetings so many times, thousands of times, and I've heard people sitting in the Sex Addicts Anonymous groups, and they'll be angry and they'll say, "Oh, I've been sober from drugs and alcohol for 10 or 15 or even 20 years, but this is what's finally brought me to my knees." So does that ring true with you?
My experience in this says that the kind of the stigma that society and culture has around just talking about even healthy sexuality, that the secrecy that's kind of forced upon and the shame that's forced upon any problematic sexual behavior. There's such pressure externally that it makes sense that concept of this is the thing that brought me to my knees, right? It definitely fits a lot of what we see. That is in a co-occurring dual diagnosis, like that is the base, that is the bottom line, that is the rock bottom for them.
Yeah. Look, thank you. And the stigma, of course, is absolutely huge. And I noticed you said it's difficult enough to talk about healthy sexuality, let alone things that people may have been doing which they are very ashamed of. And over the years, I would say the first 10 years of my recovery, I look back now and I'm very confident that I was struggling with people who did not know how to help de-shame me. The model was too much, this is just my opinion, it was too much about pure abstinence and not enough about the why, what was going on, why were you doing it? How did you come to make these decisions? Because I'm sure you'll agree with me that most of the behavioral addictions, possibly with the exception of gambling, you have to do them to live. Anorexics have to eat. Sex addicts have to have sex to procreate. So it's not as cut and dry as alcohol and drugs, where you can just stop it and you have to. So it's a little more complicated. Treatment for clients with primary, let's call it PSP. Otherwise, I'm going to keep tripping over my Invisalign thing. Treatment for clients with PSP as a primary, does it look different from those with primary substance use disorder? What do you think on that one?
Yes and no. No, it's a very neutral answer. The difference is in the nuance, right? The difference is in the understanding around what abstinence looks like, what healthy sexual behavior looks like, the nuance and the stigmas I talked about, the cultural stuff. Right? That's the difference. At its core, very similar in terms of working through traumas, working through unhealthy relational experiences, throughout life, working through those negative core dialogues and the core beliefs that are like, that are the things that lead people further and further, typically into their addiction. So that's the similarity. But again, the difference is in the nuance. And one of the things that we really hold dear to us here is our problematic sexual behavior group. When they meet, there's a very clearly described confidentiality that happens in that room, where issues around sexuality, issues around previous sexual experiences, they need to stay in that room to keep that room the safe, emotionally available space that our PSP clients don't experience outside of here. So again, the difference is in the nuance, but at its core, it's about how do we get to these, the root, the trauma, the experiences, the shame.
Yeah. Bring
people down that addiction.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It's so lovely to hear you talking like this, because I don't know. I mean, I'm going to guess you've both been at this longer than me. I've been practicing in this industry for 10 years now as a coach, and specializing in this field, guiding men back to making healthier choices. But I'm guessing you've seen this. How long have you seen this whole issue evolving from when you very first started? Or do you think this whole issue of problematic sexual behavior is something that is more recent? Or do you think it's always been there, but people have not been trained well enough to understand and help people with it?
I believe it's always been there. I think through society, through other, whether religious, cultural norms of these behaviors, they have been accepted. And I think as research has been populated over the years, it has become more of that it is problematic and that it's not okay. I think as society has evolved and we're starting to help people find their voices who may have been victimized through different acts of others, that we're getting more light and more understanding of how this is actually a problem versus just part of society.
Yeah, I also would add that access has changed, right? As our world is sped up with technology, the access around ways to act out is certainly increased. The flip side to that is, while there is still a great deal of stigma and cultural stuff around just having those basic conversations around basic healthy sex, there is also a greater acceptance of LGBTQ. So other let's say 40 years ago, the shame that was involved around that maybe that person now would feel the freedom, because there is more acceptance, to be able to talk about that, as opposed to feeling like somehow they are acting out, you know, in PSB because they identify as gay. Now it's accepted versus 40 years ago when it could have been seen as quote problematic.
Makes perfect sense. And of course, you talk of access. Of course, access is a double-edged sword, because access through these wonderful or sometimes dreadful things, of course, is part of the problem. But that of course crosses boundaries into all sorts of life, online bullying, God knows what. But certainly, maybe access sometimes isn't such a good thing. But I agree. As we are doing right now, you guys are in Argyle, Texas. I'm just west of London, England, and we can still have a fun conversation on Zoom. So, you know, it's a mixed blessing. Guys, do most of your patients or clients or their families first recognize substance use problems or PSP problems? What do you think comes first? I mean, I think you might have answered this, but generally speaking, would you say it's more likely to be the ones which are less stigmatized?
My experience is the substance, where there are visible changes, right? There is visible intoxication. There are bottles left over, right? There are physical observable behaviors that exist. And, you know, you held up your cell phone a little bit ago, right? Depending on how much someone would have their device locked down, there may be no observable or, you know, quote unquote proof, right?
Yes.
And again, as I said earlier, over the course of a client's time with us, we'll often see where some of the PSB kind of shows up throughout, you know, the more we work with them, but they're initially here for the substance. So I think that the substance is first, and then after that.
And I mean, maybe you've answered this question. This is sort of second part of the same question. Which are your clients more likely to seek residential treatment for? Or what are they not considering?
We definitely have a high percentage coming in for substance use, right?
Yeah.
I believe the thing that's not being considered in the question would be, I believe that a lot of folks coming in when they have barely even touched the idea of surrender are okay in that moment acknowledging there is a substance thing happening here. If a married couple, for example, like acknowledging, yes, I am an alcoholic, sure. You then layer in PSB. I don't know. I think there's some initial hesitancy around the actual surrender that I have to acknowledge to my partner that I've had affairs. Maybe like that, right? And so oftentimes the initial moment of getting into treatment is based in, I need immediate help now. And the actual honesty that needs to happen around PSB behaviors, it takes time to get there.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. When a patient admits at Santé for substance use disorders, what are some of the early clinical indicators within your residential setting that problematic sexual behaviors may be present or unaddressed thus far? Josh, what do you think of that one?
So considering that Santé is a residential treatment center, a lot of these folks are being referred for a higher level of care. So they may have been in an intensive outpatient or an outpatient therapeutic setting where there's considered like that treatment failure. And so they're actually being referred out to us. And so a lot of that assessment has already been done. The continued assessment that we do is either like we completing like our psychosocials and kind of seeing what reports are we getting from the individual. And I would say our primary source, besides like the collaboration between our referring partners, is those observations that we're making when the individual does arrive. How are they acting with community members? How are they acting with staff? And really kind of looking at those components and trying to puzzle that picture together to kind of help those individuals the best that we can.
Very good. In terms of in terms of substances that you treat, what's the number one substance you treat, and how do you think that impacts problematic sexual behavior?
I think within relation to like problematic sexual behaviors is definitely like the use of meth. They're highly within like the gay population. The correlation between meth use and problematic sexual behaviors is very high in correlation. And so really trying to treat what is that issue, was it? And for the most part, folks report that, hey, if I'm already acting out my sexual behaviors, then I'm going to be using the meth. And so it could be anywhere from alcohol, from other folks, and but primarily it's, I would say, meth and alcohol is through my experience.
From what I've read and experienced with some of my own clients, and I've learned by attending conferences and trainings, is that chemicals can increase the experience of sexual intercourse by hundreds of percentiles. So, of course, the problem is once you get that level of dopamine hit, once you get up there, how do you help a client to come back from that extreme to ever be satisfied with, and I say this sadly, laughingly, just boring old sex? Sex without the chemicals. How do you address that?
Well, I think it goes back to what you stated earlier, is it's finding out the why. We know what got them to us, whether it's their problematic sexual behaviors, their substance use, or all of the above, but really getting down to the root issues of the why. Why do I need to continue to increase my intensity? And so once we can continue to do that trauma work and those underlying issues, we hope to, and we see people being able to kind of come back more to, like, I guess, a normal sex life, right? And so just kind of being able to enjoy it as it's meant to be, without having to have the accelerants per se, right?
Yes, accelerants is a painfully accurate word.
I would also add the kind of a chicken and the egg idea, right? So is it using chemical to give yourself permission to act out, or is it acting out and needing the extra dopamine, right? There's so many layers to it. The individual treatment of it, super important for us. We know some of the common themes around it, but just finding the individuality around it. We really try our best to focus on that.
Thank you. I mean, it's really good to hear that, because, in times gone by, there's been a bit of a group opinion. I mean, in the early days of AA, people just sat around a room and they said, "Hi, I'm Bob, I'm George, I'm Christina, I'm an alcoholic." And it was kind of one cup fits all. But from my own experiences with sex addiction and from my experience with the men I help, it is very not the case that one solution fits all. The deviances within the sexual realm can be so huge that I think treating people as an individual is absolutely critical. So I'm thrilled to hear you say that. If an individual's substance use disorder is addressed, but their problematic sexual behavior is not, how does that impact their chance of long-term recovery?
They're still acting out, right? They're still actively participating in their addictive thinking. Their addict brain is still in charge of their decision-making. They may be chemically sober in terms of ingestion of chemical, but they are not in recovery, right? The importance of working through both of those while folks are with us, essential for us to make sure that we can get to both. We know that based on kind of our own experience here, relationships in early recovery, we know what that is. We know how unhealthy it is. And we know the fatal impact of that. And so I would offer anyone that maintaining active recovery for both is needed.
So you probably say it's going to be the same if you swap those around. I mean, if an individual addresses problematic sexual behavior, but not substance use disorder, it's just, presumably you'll say it's the same thing. If you've dealt with one but not the other, you're still acting out. And because the two, I mean, the expression sex, drugs, and rock and roll is not a coincidence. You know, they do kind of go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. So I guess, would you agree that you've got to address the whole gamut?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. What is your most common messaging on sexual health to someone in early recovery from problematic sexual behavior? What would you say to them?
The three things I think organizationally and as a treatment team that we really try to focus on and encourage our clients is patience. Be patient with yourself. As Mark, as you said earlier, recovery is not a straight line. And there will be moments, but be patient with yourself. Give grace to yourself would be the second thing. Developing an understanding of healthy sexuality and what that looks like, and moving forward without shame. Giving yourself the grace to do that. The third thing would be an active part of an active recovery community. You can't just show up. Right? You can't just be in the room. You get an active part of an active recovery community. Shared experiences, vital to recovery.
Patience, grace, and active participation. I love that. And I can strongly relate to the active participation, having been attending SAA for 20 years. I've been through times when I got very complacent and very arrogant. Have you guys, I'm sure, seen the film Thanks for Sharing? Yeah, of course you have. It's an amazing film. I've played pretty much at different times of my recovery the Mark Ruffalo role as the newcomer who actually does surrender, and I think sadly I've been in the Tim Robbins role on occasions where I think I know it all, and suddenly complacency bites me in the ass. So yeah, I can relate to that very strongly. What are some common misconceptions around problematic sexual behavior that you guys have experienced? Josh, what do you think about that?
Whenever I hear this question, I say, where do we start?
Well, pick a few of your best.
Yeah. So I think the biggest misconception that I always hear is that they have to always have sex. They're always thinking about sex. And it's all about the sex. It's all about the action of the sex. And I like to challenge that. While the sex is part of it, it's more of looking into what I believe is the attachment wound of why they are seeking that relationship, however they're seeking it. What voids are they trying to fill through the traumas that they've experienced to seek that attachment? And so what's the easiest way to attach to somebody? Have sex. And so for a lot of folks that I work with, it's also like the chase, okay, let me build the relationship. If you think more of like the sexual love addict, of trying to get those emotional holes filled. And then all of a sudden I've talked up this big game with somebody, I've gotten all my emotional needs met and I'm good. But how I've already made these promises that I would engage in some sort of sexual behavior with the other person. And now I just have to fulfill my commitment. And as they report, it's not as satisfying. And so I think if we look deep down into what the root causes of these acting out behaviors are and getting to the attachment and to the bottom line of what the traumas are that are causing these individuals to act out in this way is really what we're looking for. And so looking at it's all about sex. They just want to cheat on me, whatever you may think when you hear the words sex addict. Really getting into those underneath layers to really treat the individual what is really happening.
I love that. I have had people in my last 20 years who, if I've gotten to a point where we're having a deep enough conversation and the words sex addict or sex addiction come out of my mouth, I've had some people go, well, hey, lucky you, getting lots of sex. And I have to say, well, it's not quite as simple as that. So the why is everything. I tell you, I share with you a lovely quote, which I share with many people on these interviews, because it has an uncanny habit of coming up over and over. To do with the why, it was Desmond Tutu the late great Desmond Tutu. He said, we have to just stop pulling people out of the river. We have to go upstream and figure out why they're falling in the first place. And I just love that quote because, I mean, that pretty much defines the work you're doing so beautifully, looking at the why. Are you finding any trends specific to problematic sexual behavior with the clients you're treating?
I would say there's trends all day long. Specifically, just to kind of reiterate what Adam and I have been kind of expressing is, especially that idea if we're treating a substance but not the PSB, or we're treating the PSB and not the trauma, that we see like recidivism and readmits, we see continued relapse, and just really kind of focusing on the individuals to kind of help them become as healthy as individuals they possibly can as they continue to heal themselves and start understanding their why, and kind of making the connections of like, what got you to treatment? Oh, it's my acting out, it's my drinking, it's my drug use, right? Having them understand those are just symptoms of why they come to treatment.
Yeah.
And if we can kind of get them to a place of understanding and healing, then I think that recidivism drops. I think that propensity for relapse decreases, and just having them and giving them the hope that you can live a healthy life. You can primarily you can heal. And going back to those three facts that Adam mentioned about what's going to help them get there, the patience, the grace, and the act of recovery, living in that is what's going to help us fight these trends.
I love that, and I love helping people really understand the why, because when you empower someone with knowledge as to why they're doing something, which may well lead them back to things they were taught as a child, when they realize there's a reason, it makes it much easier to choose to stop. It's not just someone saying, darling Nancy Reagan, just say no to drugs. Well, that worked well, didn't it? Unfortunately, you can't just say to someone, just stop it. It doesn't work. You have to understand the why. Guys, it's amazing work. How does culture, gender, sexual identity, or other demographic play a role in problematic sexual behavior? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I can start, Adam. Once again, if we look back into cultural, if we look into different demographics, what is taboo? What is okay? What have we given permission within our cultures to either address or not address, right? And so, say, great. So some cultures we're like, cool, don't feel. Your feelings are they are, but we're not going to act that way because we're just going to man up, is a lot of words that I hear a lot of time around here in Texas. I hear cowboy up and just kind of get over it, right? And but what are we doing is just instilling these beliefs in folks that are going to continue to perpetuate their acting out, and so we're just continuing more like injury to the individual, emotional injury to the individual, which gets hard. And so having to kind of break through some of those cultural beliefs and actually instill new ideas and like cognitions that hopefully one day as we plant those seeds become beliefs for those individuals, I think is one of the big things we see, and probably one of the more difficult parts is kind of breaking through those lies that have been told over the years.
Thank you, Josh. Adam, any thoughts on culture?
Yeah, I mean, the many layers of it, right? Is there growing up, how did religion impact their view of sexuality? How did family of origin impact conversations around it? Some of the cultural, societal of acceptance of one's own sexuality and feeling, quote, deviant, although it's not, right, to have a gay relationship while the world believes you are not. And so, again, going back to the individuality of things, right? What is healthy sexual behavior for one person does not mean it's healthy for another. And what are the circumstances involved in that, right? The difference between having a relationship outside of marriage versus just a relationship. Those are two, there's different layers to that. And so oftentimes, again, how folks are raised, family of origin, religion, culture, ethnicity, a lot of varying degrees of how history and experience impacts the folks we see.
I have recently had the privilege of working with a youngish fellow. I think he's 26, if I recall, 26 or 27, from the strongly Jewish community of North London. And I forget how he even discovered me, but he did. And we've done some amazing work together. And I think I've learned as much from him as I hope he has from me, because listening to what he has struggled with and the what is considered normal within his community and what he wants to do, the freedom he seeks, which is so frowned upon by basically the rest of his entire community, it left me feeling very sad. I'm not judging them, but clearly I'm guessing he's not alone in terms of, and that's just one culture of people being oppressed or suppressed by cultural beliefs. And yet, as individual human beings, we all have dreams, we all have fantasies, we're human beings, we have sexual energy. What do we want to do with it? And I love what you said. I mean, what is healthy for one person is not healthy for another. You don't have to look much further than the press. Right now, I'm sure you're aware, Kevin Spacey was found innocent yesterday in the courts here in London. So who is to know? Who is to say which way that was going to go? Obviously, I'm very happy for him, but clearly there are also people who have been hurt. So we won't judge.
And there are also, just the basic example of, growing up was someone told it's inappropriate to hold hands or it's inappropriate to kiss, or there's no physical contact until you're 21, like whatever those, messages may be. And we know that the more shame that is assigned to a behavior, the further it's going to push somebody backwards to isolate, avoid those conversations. And so while it may have started as very age appropriate, healthy, sexual, intimate behavior, the shame that's assigned to it distorts how that person views healthy sexual behavior.
I mean, you don't need to look much further than, if you want to really look at two extraordinary extremes, look at how the Romans viewed sex 2,000 years ago versus how we view sex today. The Romans, if you want to believe the books, and I don't know anyone that was alive 2,000 years ago, but certainly from what I've seen and read, what we call pedophilia today was a common accepted practice 2,000 years ago. So I happen to be glad that I'm living in these times, because I know what hell I went through as a child, and it wasn't fun. But hey, on the back of it, I think I managed to find some strength in my life, which is a great thing. Guys, it's been amazing talking to you. I've got one more question for you, and perhaps you can both answer this one. What would you say was you talk about this on your website, I looked at it, the Santé Advantage as referenced on your website. Tell us about what you consider sets you apart, the Santé Advantage.
I'll go back to kind of the first question, and we were founded around work in this field and the length of time we've been doing it, the absolute passion that comes from ownership down around the respect and dignity that we hold to working with a PSP population. It's who we are, it's what we do. And that will always be. All of our clinicians, while maybe not having a direct licensure specialty in that field, we are all comfortable working within that population to make sure that our clients have every opportunity to get well, fully recover, and address the things that have to be addressed.
Beautiful. Thank you, Adam, very much. Josh, any final thoughts from you on that?
I'll just add to that, and just like he said, each clinician that works with each individual that comes in is we meet them as an individual who is hurt, showing them compassion, showing them grace, showing them mercy, whatever acts they've done or acts that have happened against them. As they come in here, providing a place of serenity for them to be able to heal with the hope of leaving to continue that healing journey in a healthy, sober-minded life. So they continue to move through their life and whatever relationships they may have in the future.
Guys, what you do is amazing work. I mean, a treatment center like yours may be, when someone with these horrific problems walks through the doors of a center like yours, it might be the first time in their life they are actually entering an establishment in which they can be, and ultimately, hopefully, feel safe. So clearly, what your Santé Advantage, if that's what it's engendering, then you are doing the world a huge favor. Guys, it's been fascinating talking to you. I could talk for a lot longer, but you've given me so much of your time. I know you're busy. You run an amazing treatment center in a hot part of the world. I have to say, it's a shame you're not over here in England, because I'm not sure I could, as an Englishman, I could tolerate the heat of Argyle, Texas. But guys, keep going, keep cool in the air conditioning. I hope the rest of your summer is not too hot. And again, just a huge thank you to both of you for your time today.